Hello, hi, welcome back to your 10-minute true crime fix with me, Yinka Bokinni. I hope that you guys are doing alright this week, and this is the place where I stick 10 minutes on the clock, and I always get this wrong where it's going to be, and I don't know why, but there's going to be 10 minutes anyway, and I tell you as much about a case as possible. Today, we are delving into the world of cults for the first time ever on this series. Yikes. Specifically, I'm going to tell you about Heaven's Gate and the mass suicide that took place this week in 1997. Before we begin, it's a lot, so use the description for all of the notes and to further your research. Also, make sure you like and subscribe and comment and tell your mates and all that sort of stuff. If you want to see more of my content, we're currently on the road to 5k subscribers and hopefully we get there soon. Welcome to the anniversary. Shwa-na-na-na, 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 shwa-na-na-na. Heaven's Gate was a religious group that was founded in the USA in the early 70s by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles. They met when Bonnie was a nurse and Marshall was staying at a psychiatric institution. They went on a 6-month-long road trip across the USA, and together they assembled a group called The Crew. Now, Bonnie would die in 1985 and Marshall would go on to become the leader of the cult that we know as Heaven's Gate, but he wasn't the original mastermind behind the operation. According to a documentary that I will link for you in the description, he was recruited by Bonnie. She was interested in astrology, in UFOs. She had various new age philosophies, visiting psychics. This was a habit that she had, and astrologers as well. She had been married with children, but that fell apart when she was told on some of her visits to the psychics that she would meet a tall man with light hair and a fair complexion, and they would go on a journey to bring salvation. Enter Marshall. He was originally a music teacher at a few different unis. He was fired from his last post from the University of Texas, I believe it was, for an alleged relationship with a male student. Initially, what they would do is go to different cities and stuff, or states or whatever. They would print off these pamphlets and these leaflets, and it was pretty much like a sci-fi take on Christianity. Like, there was some Christianity in their philosophies, but also aliens and UFOs, and they were sort of creating this new religion. In 1975, they had a rally in Oregon where 200 people showed up, and they managed to persuade 20 of them to abandon their families, abandon their possessions, give up all their money, where they promised, and this was their base message, like, you know, cults have like a thing that's going to happen, like it's going to culminate in something. They promised that an extraterrestrial spacecraft would take them to the kingdom of heaven, like the aliens would come and they would beam them up Scotty. Bonnie and Marshall changed their names again to Do and T. So like Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, because obviously he was a music teacher, that's quite cute. Marshall was called Do and Bonnie was called T. The group that we now know as Heaven's Gate travelled around for 2 decades. Their followers were the sorts of people who were questioning, what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? What is the point of all of this stuff? I wake up every day and I've got things to do. But I think, you know, it's the 70s. The internet doesn't exist yet. It actually plays quite a big part in this story. You know, people were just questioning loads of things, and Marshall and Bonnie, or Do and T, kind of gave them a few answers, and it was just a little bit more exciting than traditional Christianity. Sure, they even taught that Mary, you know, like Jesus' mum, she was impregnated by being taken up into a spacecraft, and the followers really liked the take on sci-fi and on Christianity, the blend of the two, and to them it made more sense. And in order to be inducted, you would have to cleanse your body of any impurities, of fast food, of sexual thoughts, because they were no on the sex game as well. Even though Marshall and Bonnie were together for quite a long time, it said that they didn't engage in any sexual activity. Usually cults are run by sex mad people who just want to be having it with everyone. Heaven's Gate was the opposite of that. The most loyal of their male members wanted to prove it so much that they were surgically castrated. You weren't even allowed to think about sex. In order to cleanse, what they would do was for 3 months, new recruits would live off a diet of lemonade, cayenne pepper, and maple syrup. Lemonade, cayenne pepper, and maple syrup only, and then after 3 months they would be welcomed into the group and they would be part of this extraterrestrial sect Throughout the years, throughout the decades, and especially after Bonnie's death, the teachings of Heaven's Gate would change and they would develop, which is a little bit, but, you know, when you make something up, you can kind of change it if you want to change it. They started teaching a new philosophy that bodies were the containers for your souls. Inside is the butter and this is the flora pack. And then you'd leave that behind and your soul would ascend. People were giving up their life savings for this as well, so they were able to rent houses across America. They would cover the windows whenever they rented a new house. They wouldn't chat to outsiders at all, and they would often test their followers to weed out the ones who weren't ride or die. Every so often they would make them stand outside for the whole night and they'd wait for the aliens to come. So they'd be like, oh guys, Tuesday, at some point between midnight and 6 a.m, the aliens are coming. And then when it would reach morning, they'd be like, oh no, there's no aliens, just wanted to see if you'd stay outside. To you and I, it seems a little bit off, but in Cultland, 0 out of 10, wouldn't recommend. It's a really great way to see who is devoted, because when you've got a super charismatic leader, as was Marshall, you'll do anything to prove to him that you believe what he's saying. Ultimately, their followers want them to know that they believe they are preaching the truth. By the time that 1980 rolled around, they had 80 members of their cult, which is quite a lot, you know. Those followers were completely isolated from their families. They were allowed to call home once in 1982, and in 1983, they were allowed to visit their families on Mother's Day, and they were instructed to tell them that they were studying computers at a monastery. Now, I think this was to quell any questions as to why Dave and Diane have off-skied with the religious sect. Over the course of the couple of decades that they were in session, several hundred people came and left over the years, and by the early 90s, they only had 26 followers. Bonnie was the brains of the operation, and when she passed away, it was just left to Marshall. She had died, like I said earlier, it was from cancer. Marshall told the group that her broken down vehicle was left behind and her soul had transcended to the aliens. And Bonnie's passing solidified their belief that the body was just a container, and their thinking evolved again into believing that you could now leave it behind at any time. So you essentially could just rock on up to a spaceship if there was one there, and the aliens wouldn't have to initiate Operation Get the Souls Off of Earth. In 1993, there was a rebrand and they became Total Overcomers Anonymous, which is a pretty cool name. They had a few names over the years, actually, Human Individual Metamorphosis, before settling on Heaven's Gate a little bit later in the 90s. And funnily enough, the introduction of the World Wide Web, yes, the internet, did a number for this cult. So they had 39 active cult members, and they made a series of web pages for online businesses, and they developed this online web design firm. They used the money that they made from that to rent a big old mansion just outside of San Diego, and this is where the idea of suicide came to Marshall. He explained that everything human needed to be left behind, including the body, before you could ascend. They made a website and they were trying to recruit people on that as well. They believed that the last chance to evacuate Earth was coming. That Hale-Bopp, the comet, it was like the most observed of the 20th century, and it was like the brightest comet that anyone had ever seen. People were going mad about it. It was a huge phenomenon in the 1990s, and our friends at Heaven's Gate decided that the comet had a spaceship following it behind it. So there was a comet, and then behind the comet was a spaceship, and in that spaceship Bonnie was in there, and she was with the aliens, and they've only got a certain amount of time to catch their ride, so to speak. Like, the spaceship is a train. Marshall did his best to warn the rest of the world about the forthcoming spaceship. In March 1997, they recorded farewell videos saying how happy they were to be getting going, and I just think about the families of these 39 people who already have lost them to the cult, but then after the mass suicide, seeing videos of them being like, cheerio, must have been so heartbreaking. The group had a last supper. Every member got an identical order: salad, iced teas, turkey pot pie, and cheesecake with blueberries, and then the suicides began. What happened was the members took barbiturates and alcohol, and then the people who were assisting them placed bags over their heads. They all wore matching Nike Cortez and black tracksuits, which isn't great advertising, but that's what they all wore. And then when they had died, purple shrouds were placed over their heads. And Marshall was one of the last to die. 3 assistants helped him. They placed a shroud over his head, and then they committed suicide themselves. And an anonymous tip came in on March the 26th, and police discovered all of the identical bodies. There's a museum in LA called the Death Museum, or the Museum of Death, and they've managed to get their hands on some of the tracksuits that they were wearing, the bunk beds, and they've got them set up, which I kind of want to visit it, but it's very creepy. And you can go there and you can see exactly how they were found. 21 women and 18 men of varying ages were found. They were wearing armbands that said Heaven's Gate Away Team on it as well, and they were successful. It was the largest group suicide involving USA citizens since the Jonestown massacre, which is a crazy story because something like 900 people died there. But in this case, in Heaven's Gate, when this came to light and when the media circus descended, people just wanted to know why. And there was one dude who was left who shed some light on it, and he was just saying that they wanted Marshall to know that they believed what he was saying. Charismatic leader. Charismatic leader. There you have it. There you have it. Oh, goodness gracious. 10 minutes are up, finito, and that was the story of Heaven's Gate. A little bit of a different video from me, but how mad is that, actually? From doing the research, I swear the Simpsons cult episode where the guy ends up cycling away in a little airplane that looks like a UFO is based on this. It might not be, but I just feel like it's based on this. I really do. Thank you for watching. Crazy story. Please use the research for everything that I use to piece this together, and follow my true crime Instagram for almost daily updates, and don't forget to like, subscribe, to comment if you enjoy my videos. Road to 5k. Woohoo! I'll see you next week. Have a good one.